The broad question is how do you recognize when you are misaligned or alignment isn't there?
The main indication of that there is probably an issue of misalignment is if you are not achieving the outcomes that you want in your business, whether it's within the team at a business unit level or organizational wide. Then you can start to honestly diagnose and assess where is misalignment taking place? Why are we not able to achieve these results? What's happening? Have we fundamentally skipped a part of the process? Are we not paying attention to market conditions? Did we not do the work that we needed to in strategy? It starts to really help you understand and peel the layers apart of what's happening in the organization. And so a lot of times we can see it very quickly. You mentioned kind of that self-assessment. And one of the easiest ways is in product, is to say, well, what's the product vision? And many times it's more a stated goal. They'll present a plan. And well, planning is not strategy. It doesn't help, anyone in the organization know if we solve this problem for our customer, what is that actual destination or that long-term outcome look like? What kind of value are we creating? And what time horizon or what does that look like so we can somehow measure our results as we move towards that long-term outcome? And so many times, more often than not, we will find that that's missing right away. And so there's an issue of misalignment that's happening. And that is a pretty critical tool. It's to help individuals know how their work matters. They need to understand what they're working towards. If you want to have empowered teams, you need to give them a way to prioritize the problems and the work that they're doing in order to make sure that they're not just achieving near-term outcomes, but they're actually moving you towards that vision successfully. A lot of times we also see that there's fragmentation across the organization, or that vision is interpreted differently. And so when there's this fragmentation and there's this different interpretation of what that means, that becomes very problematic. And that's a great indicator that there's misalignment. And misalignment, unfortunately, will manifest itself in lagging indicators in very costly ways, in time, money, high turnover rates in the organization, just as a few quick examples. And so those are really the results of misalignment, and those symptomatic issues are things that we have to be addressing early on in order to keep our teams engaged and focused on the right things.
So in a way, the alignment starts all the way from alignment with the customer, the external world, to alignment internally across different levels, all the way down to the individuals. I think that's critical, even more dramatically for startups, because the environment, both internally and external environment, change very, very rapidly. What's the advice you have for people to connect those aligned? Because that's really appealing to get everything perfectly aligned.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a couple of easy areas to start that every organization, whether you're a startup or a well-established, company, that you need to really keep, top of mind. One is fundamentally an organization, or as you lead an organization, you have to understand the difference, as I mentioned earlier, between strategy and planning and execution. And so we hear a lot of times about the execution gap, this gap that, we have this idea or we have this outcome we want to achieve. We start building something and then it doesn't have the outcome we intended. That execution gap is because no bridge was ever built. You're making a leap of faith that somehow if we do this, that this will happen. And it's not grounded, and most often in its execution and process. And so without a clear direction, how do you know what resources or people or process are even needed to achieve the intended outcome that you're working towards? And so when I'm working with founders or executive teams, one of the key things that we do is, we'll start by really making sure there's a clear definition of what is that product vision? What is the intended outcome of that? And does everybody hold that the same way? And so one of the simplest things you can start with is asking, if you're sitting in a room with your colleagues and saying, okay, for example, we keep saying we're customer centric. What does that mean? Have every person go around in the room and explain what that means to them, because everybody might hold that term differently. Or in a development environment, we need to be more agile. Okay, well, what does agile mean to you? What are you communicating to me when you say that we need to, work more agile? Is it, or we need to, follow more agile methodology? Are you saying we need to be more nimble and adaptive to the market? Well, agile doesn't skip the steps of good strategy and planning. It's actually a prerequisite to good, agile development. So we look at those pieces, and I think that often people tend to move really fast and they stop doing that checks and balances process of reconciling. Do you understand this the way I do? And that's fundamentally one of the most easiest ways for anybody to start, is just to reconcile that, because that leads to rework, miscommunication, fragmentation, and deliverables. It has a cascading effect of issues that come with that when there's that misunderstanding. And the bigger the company, the more significant those challenges and the outcomes, or the impacts of that misalignment can be, because it's harder to correct. So I think that's really important to understand that, as just as one example.